distinguished delegates, at the outset, I offer my sincere gratitude and respect to Professor V.C. Bansal and Mrs. Uma Bansal, for whom I am here to deliver the oration. And I am also thankful to Indian Academy of Clinical Medicine for considering me to deliver this prestigious oration. But at the outset, I want to be forgiven for this technical error, because I have some videos which I could have shown you directly from this my laptop, but it is not working. So I will try to show this, but it will take a little more time. So please, I beg your pardon. Now, why I have chosen to talk about Parkinson's disease in front of the physicians? You know that Parkinson's disease is the second most neurodegenerative disease after Alzheimer's disease, and it affects the patients of old age. And Parkinson's disease patients have often several comorbidities like ischemic heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, osteoarthritis, and so on. So they cannot wait in the OPD for a long time, and it is often very difficult to get neurologists for home visits. So physicians are the mainstay of treatment for Parkinson's disease. Now I will cover Parkinson's disease in these headings like historical aspects, epidemiology, clinical aspects, advances in genetics and understanding of pathophysiology, some clinical genotypes and current treatment options, and experimental treatment in the future. Now if you go back by 4,500 years ago, the Indian literature mentions about Kampa Bhava, which is a condition of stiffness, shaking, love of solitude, dribbling and staring. And Kampa means tremor and Bheta means palsy. So in the 15th century, Basava Rajiam, that is melancholy and falling mental faculties, were added to this description. Interestingly, in Ayurvedic Material Medica recommends the use of Atma Mukta, that is a bean which was sold in Indian bazaars for centuries for the treatment of gastrointestinal, nervous, endocrine and reproductive medicines. And later on, the seeds of this plant was called as Mucuna pruriens, which used to contain levodopa. And I can mention another plant, that is Hyoscyamus reticularis. So that is also used for Kampa Bhava in ancient literature. Now, in AD 175, Galen first mentioned in English literature shaking palsy, but the detailed description, that is an essay on shaking palsy, was published by James Parkinson in the year 1817 by observing his patients of Parkinson's disease in the streets of London and also in his chamber. Now, this 60 years after that, a French neurologist, Jean-Martin Charcot, recognized the work of James Parkinson and he named the disease as Parkinson's disease. Now, I am going to little bit about epidemiology. The prevalence of Parkinson's disease is 1 in 100 above the age of 60 years, and it increases to 5 in 100 above the age of 85 years. And in our country, like populous country like India, where the geriatric population is increasing day by day, you can very well imagine that what will be the burden of Parkinson's disease in the near future. And prevalence rate varies from 18 to 418 all over the world, and incidence is 8 to 18 per lakh person per year. Now, little bit of Indian epidemiology. In the Parsi community, the prevalence of Parkinson's disease is common, that is 328 per lakh population, and in non-Parsi community, it ranges from 14 to 52. Now, you have heard two terms. One is Parkinsonism, another is idiopathic Parkinson's disease. When you call Parkinsonism, if a person suffers from bradykinesia plus any one of these three, like rigidity, tremor and postural reflex, loss of postural reflexes, any one of these three plus bradykinesia makes a person suffering from Parkinsonism. And what is idiopathic Parkinson's disease? It is a subtype of Parkinsonism where, in addition to features of Parkinsonism, you must have unilateral onset and persistent asymmetry. Even after 20 years, 25 years of disease, you will see the difference in the both sides. So that is persistent asymmetry, and there is rest tremor, that is 4 to 6 hours rest tremor, and it should be a progressive disorder, and there should be excellent and persistent response to levodopa therapy, and the clinical course should be 10 years or more. So I will just show you a video. jolly well make out the difference between two sides. Even after 18 years, you can jolly well say that which side is more involved and which side is less involved. So this asymmetry is a clue, and the person is suffering from 18 years. So all this makes you a diagnosis of idiopathic Parkinson's disease, because other varieties of Parkinsonism hardly remains mobile after so many years. And you can see here also that he can hardly move the left side, but his right side is quite well. And he has got a lot of bradykinesia. And if you watch his gait, you will find that he is having a short shuffling gait, a stooped posture, and he is taking too much time to turn around. So he is taking 3-4 steps to turn around. So this is the classical feature of idiopathic Parkinson's disease. Now, before diagnosing idiopathic Parkinson's disease, you should exclude host of other conditions. These are the red flag signs of idiopathic Parkinson's disease. That should be history of repeated stroke, history of repeated head injury, history of encephalitis, history of neuroleptic treatment at the onset of symptoms, MPTP exposure, negative response to large doses of levodopa, more than one affected relative, sustained remission, and strictly unilateral feature even after 3 years. There should be bilateral involvement, but one side should be more than other. And early autonomic involvement, early dementia, oculogyric crisis, supranuclear gauge palsy, pyramidal signs, cerebellar signs, and presence of cerebral tumors and communicating antidoulars. All these exclude idiopathic Parkinson's disease. Now, the key classification of Parkinson's disease is pseudo-Parkinsonism, like essential tremor, which is very common in the community, vascular Parkinsonism, and pyramidal swelling. All these may mimic Parkinson's disease. And true Parkinsonism, as I have already told you, idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and drug-induced Parkinsonism, that is very, very important. And one drug I thought that I should mention, because livosulpiride. So this is mostly used by physicians as prokinetic agent. And this livosulpiride, the commonest neurological toxicity is the Parkinson's disease. So when you find a patient on livosulpiride developing features of Parkinsonism, please stop livosulpiride. So this is mostly used by gastroenterologists and physicians. And other drugs which are used produces Parkinsonism are neuroleptin, humanizine, metoclopramide, cholenzapine, and so on. And diffuse Lewy body disease, these are true Parkinsonism, and there are some atypical Parkinsonism like progressive supranuclear palsy, multisystem atrophy, and corticobasal degeneration. And there are some secondary causes of Parkinsonism like Wilson disease, Alzheimer's disease, juvenile Huntington disease, neuroacanthocytosis, post-reticulolytic Parkinsonism, traumatic, metals, toxins, and mass lesions. Now, what is the difference between idiopathic Parkinson's disease and atypical Parkinsonism or Parkinson plus syndrome? So, in idiopathic Parkinson's disease, only there is hereditary tremor, bradykinesia, and loss of postural reflexes. There is a good response to levodopa, prognosis is good, and if you do the brain biopsy, you will find Lewy bodies. But in Parkinson plus syndrome, there is additional signs of symptoms. I will come to that later on. It is a poor response to levodopa, and prognosis also poor, and you can get other intrusions like neuropituitary tangles which are found in Alzheimer's disease. Now, again, I am sorry, but so this is a patient. You can see here that person has been asked to look down, so he cannot look down. But when he asked to look sidewise, he can have some movement. So he has got a vertical gauge palsy, and you can see the dystonic posture of the limbs. So that is basically a patient of progressive supranuclear palsy. Whereas this patient, you can see that he has got presented to us within 2 months feature of this sort of symptoms. Like he is a little bit of chorea due to levodopa therapy, but he has got mild cerebral signs. In the you can see that Hill test is positive, and he has got some pyramidal signs, that is spasticity in the lower limbs. You can see here. You can see that little bit of spasticity. So it is the early stage. So patient has got features of cerebral involvement, patient has got features of pyramidal involvement as well as Parkinsonian feature. So this is a patient of multisystem atrophy. and he has got some autonomic features also in the form of incontinence of urine. So you can see here he is falling down to one side. So you can see that this is a patients of normal person, and this is the patients of Parkinson's disease. You can see here there is loss of dopaminergic neurons, that is pigmented neurons in the midbrain, in the substantia nigra. And here you can see that these are the normal brain section showing the population of dopamine containing cells. But here these are the picture from a patient's neurons, which are much decreased than this. And you can see in the substantia nigra there is presence of Lewy bodies. Now, so what is Lewy body and what is alpha-synuclein? So here you can see, so this is a Lewy body as I have shown you, and this is a high power view of the granular core, which is made up of various nitrated, phosphorylated and ubiquitinated proteins, and which are surrounded by a pale halo which comprise of neurofilaments and alpha-synuclein. I will come to alpha-synuclein later on, and this is a confocal image of a dual-level substantia nigra Lewy body that was stained for ubiquitin, and it is a red is ubiquitin and alpha-synuclein is the outer ring. So initially Lewy bodies was initially thought to be toxic and to contribute to neurodegeneration. More recently it has been postulated to represent a form of agriosome that develops in response to increased levels of misfolded proteins, and among these the most common is the alpha-synuclein, to segregate and facilitate the clearance of these potentially toxic proteins. Now more about alpha-synuclein, and you can see that the alpha-synuclein is a alpha helical structure, and this is present in normal human brain in the presynaptic terminal, and it has some function related to neurotransmission. But under pathological conditions, what happens, this alpha helical structure is converted to a beta pleated sheet-like structure, and they are actually taken by these Lewy bodies. So Lewy bodies is to clear them. But what has been found that, those patients in our student time, it was found that for surgical treatment of Parkinson's disease, there was fetal nigral cell transplantation. And when these patients later on died, a biopsy was done, and surprisingly it was seen that within these fetal nigral cells there was formation of Lewy bodies. So how this occurred? And then again, when this alpha-synuclein from the Parkinson's disease patient models are injected into the rat's brain, this alpha-synuclein spread to all of the brain producing Lewy bodies. So it was thought that this alpha-synuclein transformed protein, that is that may act like a prion protein. So nowadays there is a question whether Parkinson's disease is a prion-like disorder, but correct answer is not available yet. Now, when we were a student, we used to know that Parkinson's disease is basically environmental disease, and due to environmental toxins, it acts on genetically susceptible persons. But nowadays, there is genetic causes of Parkinson's disease has been found out, and several genes has been mapped, and locus also has been mapped. So, Parkinson's disease, yes, there is environmental factors are there, like smoking is a protective factor, and occupational exposure like pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, so they are basically predisposes to Parkinson's disease. So both genetic as well as environmental factors act on the etiology of Parkinson's disease, and there is excitatory, inflammatory, mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, neurotrophic failure, and proteasomal dysfunction, protein aggregation. So all these lead to cell loss, that is dopaminergic cell loss in the brain. Now another new information I want to provide to you is that nowadays it is thought that Parkinson's disease develops in stages. This is according to Braak hypothesis, but there is some controversies about that, but still this is the latest opinion that Parkinson's disease starts in one part of the brain, that is in the dorsal nucleus of vagus, and then it spreads to the olfactory nucleus, and and ultimately to locus coeruleus. So up to this is the pre-symptomatic phase. So this I will come to you later on. When it affects the substantia nigra, there is clinical manifestation of the Parkinson's disease like rigidity, tremor, bradykinesia. So Parkinson's disease start much early in stage 1, and ultimately it goes to mesocortex and ultimately to neocortex, and there is constant progression of the disease. So this I have shown you that this starts in the dorsal nucleus of vagus and ultimately goes to the spreads to the different area of this brain, and as the disease progresses, there is clinical manifestation of the disease. Now another very interesting thing I want to tell you that Danish government has a very good registry, and when you are students, you know that there was one form of treatment for peptic ulcer disease before the advent of this PPI and this H2 blockers. So what was that? That was vagotomy. So two forms of vagotomy was there. One was highly selective vagotomy and another was total vagotomy. And this Danish registry showed that when the persons who had total vagotomy, they developed much less Parkinson's disease than the general population, and also that those people who underwent highly selective vagotomy. So vagotomy had some role in protection of the Parkinson's disease. So based on this, the current hypothesis is that Parkinson's disease is caused by exposure to lipopolysaccharides, that is bacterial endotoxin, which promotes alpha-synuclein, that I have told you, overexpression or aggregation, that is transformation in neurons of the submucosal plexus of the GI tract, and then spreads via the neuronal network to the medulla and then rostally with cumulative neurological signs. So this is a new thought, but work is still going on. So this hypothesis has now started from the peripheral nervous system or enteric nervous system, and it just spreads to the different areas of the brain. Now there are two phenotypes of Parkinson's disease. One is tremor dominant and another is non-tremor dominant. And in the non-tremor dominant, there is two varieties, that is akinetic digit syndrome and postural instability gait disorder. And there is another additional variety, the combination of 1 and 2. Now, what is the natural history between these two subtypes of Parkinson's disease? So, tremor dominant has a earlier onset, less bradykinesia, less dementia, and slower progression. Whereas, in the non-tremor dominant Parkinson's disease, it is a later onset, and there is severe bradykinesia, severe dementia, and rapid progression. So, this is basically a bad type of Parkinson's disease. Now, this is very interesting that this is, we diagnose Parkinson's disease based on rigidity, tremor, bradykinesia, that is motor symptoms. But as early as 20 years before this motor signs of Parkinson's disease develop, the disease starts, as I told you, probably in the gut or in the dorsal nucleus of vagus. And so the patient has got constipation, REM sleep behavior disorder. You know, during sleep they often throw leg, they shout, they go out of bed, and there is a problem to the bed partner. So there is excessive daytime somnolence, hyposmia, depression. So these are some of the motor manifestations which may predate about 20 years before the development of Parkinson's disease. But as because these symptoms are also common in general population, except from probably REM sleep behavior disorder, it is very difficult to diagnose Parkinson's disease early, because till date there is no biomarker that can give you a clue that this person is going to develop Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease is basically diagnosed based on clinical or motor signs and symptoms. And as the disease progresses, you know, even if it is levodopa, after 5 to 10 years, all patients develop fluctuations, dyskinesia, and ultimately they develop psychosis, maybe due to levodopa therapy or due to disease itself. There may be dysphagia, postural instability, freezing gait, falls, which are difficult to treat, and also several other non-motor symptoms like pain, fatigue, mind cognitive impairment, urinary symptoms, orthostatic hypotension, and dementia. So this is the natural course of the Parkinson's disease. Now non-motor symptoms I have already described, but among them hyposmia is very important, and autonomic dysfunctions, neuropsychiatric symptoms, among them psychosis, dementia, sleep disorders like REM sleep behavior disorder, excessive daytime somnolence, restless leg syndrome, periodic leg movement during sleep. These are certain non-motor symptoms which is more important. And most common obviously is the anxiety, sweats, and also slow thinking, fatigue, and akathisia. Now about some treatment issues. So one thing you have to remember, there is no cure for Parkinson's disease, so treatment is symptomatic. So when you treat symptomatic therapy, you give either the symptoms are interfering with activities of daily living, or patient is having a social embarrassment, like a public figure, he has to sing, he has to deliver lecture, so at that time you need some form of therapy. But one thing I tell you, from day one when you diagnose Parkinson's disease, you should ask for physical therapy. Because physiotherapy is very helpful and improves motor function, but it does not have any long-lasting effect. The effect in motor function will improve as long as patient is on physical therapy. And one thing I tell you very interesting is that there are some methods which if the patient adopts by a specialist who is on movement disorder physiotherapies, they can change the patient's life a lot. Now there is issue of neuroprotection. Till date, no drug is found to be neuroprotective. One drug was mentioned previously, that is dasagiline. Dasagiline is a MAO inhibitor. It was found to be neuroprotective in 1 milligram dose, but later on when the dose was increased to 3 milligram, it was found it has got no neuroprotective role. So till date, there is no neuroprotective therapy. Now when to start treatment, as I have told you already, but with what agent? So that is very, very important, whether you start treatment with levodopa or a dopa agonist. Now it is generally agreed that previously it was thought that if you start treatment at a later date, so with levodopa, the chances of levodopa induced complication will be less. But this is no more in vogue because the levodopa induced complication depends upon the duration of Parkinson's disease, not upon the levodopa dosage or starting levodopa treatment. So it is your choice whether you start levodopa at the onset or you can give dopa agonists like dopamine or pramipexole. But these two drugs are expensive, so one has to decide. But in general, if you given a choice, if the patient is younger, like less than 65 years old, you can start with dopa agonists. If the person is more than 65 years old, you can start with levodopa therapy because that is the gold standard therapy for idiopathic Parkinson's disease. And dyskinesia and fluctuation I will come, and therapy for non-motor features is that you should give symptomatic therapy for that, but please avoid certain drugs which may induce Parkinsonism, like I have told you, nivolumab, like olanzapine. So these sort of drugs you should avoid. And there are some promising treatment, but you can get the Indian guideline for the treatment of Parkinson's disease, and where I am also one of the co-authors, and you can get this free in the internet. So there are everything about starting from disease onset to the advanced Parkinson's disease treatment, you will get everything. Now these are the drugs which I have already told you. This is the gold standard treatment. Now you have got some dopa agonists, and you have got anticholinergics. They are not used in the elderly because of they produce constipation, incontinence, dementia. So they are mostly used in young patients with tremor. Now selegiline and this entacapone. So selegiline is a MAO inhibitor as well as dasagiline. So they are used either in the early part of the disease or later on when there is wearing off phenomena. And entacapone is a drug which is used, is a COMT inhibitor which prolongs the action of levodopa. Now amantadine is used in dopa-induced dyskinesia. Now, as I have told you, there is no good in delay starting treatment with levodopa. Now, why all these levodopa-induced complications occurs? So, this is the therapeutic window of a patient with Parkinson's disease, and this is dyskinesia threshold. So, initially, what happens? The number of dopaminergic neurons are much more in the brain, and in whatever form you give levodopa, they are stored in the brain in those dopaminergic neurons. So there is the normal response is noted in the early Parkinson's disease. But as the disease progresses, the number of dopaminergic neurons comes down, and the therapeutic window becomes narrow. And so patient depends upon external levodopa, and sometimes it processes this smart, and when it falls below the responses, so there is wearing off phenomena. So at this stage you can add MAO inhibitor or COMT inhibitor to prolong the action of levodopa. And ultimately in the advanced stage, the therapeutic window is very narrow because the dopaminergic cells are died. So whatever patient totally depends on external levodopa. And if you give levodopa, it suddenly processes the therapeutic window. It processes the therapeutic window, and there is dyskinesia. And after some time, then again the levodopa level falls, and there is no response. I am showing just a video. Otherwise. So this is a lady who is suffering from Parkinson's disease for about 8-9 years, and you can see that she is wearing off. He has taken levodopa about 2 hours ago, and there is hardly any movement. He cannot move at all. And she has been asked to drink the water from the glass, and she cannot move. And you can see. So what has been done? She was given levodopa, and you can see after half an hour of levodopa therapy, what is applied. So as I have told you, in advanced Parkinson's disease, these phenomena occur. So how to get out of this? So you have got few options, like you can give amantadine. That is used in levodopa into dyskinesia. That helps for some time. You can reduce the dose of levodopa and add a COMT inhibitor, so that the duration of action of levodopa is prolonged, but the dose of levodopa is reduced. But ultimate answer to this is obviously is there, and you can see that. So just 2 minutes because of this. So the answer to this is the deep brain stimulation. We place some electrodes in the subthalamic nucleus on the both sides, and there is an excellent response. So there are certain established criteria for deep brain stimulation in like advanced Parkinson's disease. Age should be less than 70 years. There should be disabling motor fluctuations, and there should be good response to levodopa, and there is absence of depression and dementia, and absence of significant white matter lesions in the MRI. And nowadays there is a trend to use this deep brain stimulation early, after 5-6 years, when these complications of Parkinson's disease starts to appear. It was published in NEJM in 2013, that is early stage study. Now, these two videos actually were very beautiful, but I don't know how much I can show you. So this person had, idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and he had. And you can see here that how slow he is. And you can see here that how slow he is. I don't have his video of dyskinesia, but I am showing you hearing of phenomena. The response of levodopa persists only for 30 minutes or so. And the patient has been asked to get up, and he cannot get up, and he cannot even fall. You can see that he is getting up like this. He does not fall also because so much of akinetic and rigid. And you can see that I have actually two videos side by side so that you can see, but unfortunately I could not show you this one. But turning, you see how he is turning, and after DBS you can see how the patient is doing now. And now the patient is asked to get up, and you can see how quickly he can get up. And his foot movement has also improved a lot, and he can get up in one go, and you can see his gait. At that time he had very difficulty in negotiating and very difficulty in turning. So last couple of slides, I will conclude. So there are certain other therapies, they are in experimental stage. I am not going into details about it. Just before concluding, I want to say there is something new has come in the vaccination of Parkinson's disease. I have told you that Parkinson's disease is an alpha-synucleinopathy, and this alpha-synuclein is a transformed protein. So when this alpha-synuclein is transformed from normal to abnormal, what happens? The scientists have tried to produce immunity against them by injecting an antigen which will mimic transformed alpha-synuclein. And antibodies will be produced in the body, and that antibody will act on the transformed alpha-synuclein, and thereby there will be prevention of Parkinson's disease. And what I have learned that this experiment is going on in the humans in the last couple of years. So I don't know what will happen ultimately. So take-home message is that Parkinson's disease is the second commonest neurodegenerative disease after Alzheimer's disease. There is no biomarker available for the diagnosis, so only clinical diagnosis is available. You have to differentiate between Parkinson's plus syndrome and Parkinson's because of the prognostic issues. And now there are new thoughts, although unproven, whether it is a primary disorder, whether it starts from peripheral enteric system and spreads to the brain as per Braak hypothesis. And treatment is symptomatic, no proven neuroprotective therapy. Physical exercise is a must from day one, and deep brain stimulation is effective in certain situations.